Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection Podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection Podcast. I'm your host, John Calvin. Old friend of the podcast, back with us today. It actually has been roughly 2 years, something of that nature, since I know I last spoke with this person, but she has been a wildlife technician in Yellowstone National Park working on the wolf, cougar, and elk projects. She's also a fellowship with Conservation Nation for 2.5 years as well. Taylor Rabe. Taylor, so good to see you. How's everything going in Yellowstone today? Is it hot as it is in California, or is it starting to cool down a little bit?
Yeah, it's great to be back with you guys. Yellowstone is a madhouse as usual in the summer. It's super warm here still. We're starting to get a little bit into the sub-winter temps, about 28 to 30 degrees in the early morning. But it's been absolute chaos. I feel like the visitation is at an all-time high. So we're super busy giving hundreds of talks, but it's good, sharing the wildlife and wolves with people. It's been fun.
I mean, what's it like for you to be in this role for 2.5 years? It doesn't even seem like that long. I feel as though when we spoke with you and Jeremy and Kira and Jack and all of you, like in the very beginnings of this podcast, everything was so fresh and new, I think, for all of us, really. And now that you've settled into this conservation role and this Yellowstone role, what have you seen for yourself in the last 2.5 years how you've grown and how things have sort of been shaped in your life?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I think just from when I talked to you guys last, my ability to public speak and speak without feeling uncomfortable has really grown. I feel like I could do all of this with my eyes closed the majority of the time. So it feels good. It feels natural. And that's been exciting. And it's also just been fun to kind of step into this more of a research role, a little bit more of the wildlife management side of things. When I was previously working as a guide while volunteering for the park, it was a completely different situation. And so it's been fun kind of trying to navigate and kind of figure out where I fit in and how best to use my abilities to share education and knowledge with visitors and other organizations and groups, just to better understand wolves and kind of their role in the ecosystem. So it's been fun.
What's usually the best way for you? I probably asked this 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever the first time you were on. What's the best way for you to get the information across to folks? Is it telling stories? Is it PowerPoints? Is it you know what I mean? Because some people always have their way of exploring their passion. So for you to express your passion, what's the best way for you to do that?
Yeah, for me, I think I have found this sort of niche on social media. Social media can be the devil in a lot of ways, but it also is a really good way to get information out to a large audience very quickly. And so I think something that we've constantly dealt with regarding wolves is how controversial they are and how political they are. And so being able to share their stories online, showing the day in the lives of wild wolves is super, super important. Over my last 5 years here in the park, I have had hundreds of people come up to me to say, I came to Yellowstone to see the wolves because of your social media page. And that is so important. I share some of the dirty stuff. Wolves are predators. They have to hunt. We know this. But I'm also sharing the tender, sweet moments, of a mother interacting with her puppies for the first time, or one of the big sisters playing around with the youngsters. And so I think that's really important. And I think that that's how I share and educate most effectively. Also, I have the chance to share with visitors in person, which is super, super beneficial. People care about things that they see. And so when I'm able to show someone they're a wolf for the very first time or a grizzly bear through the scope, that's super impactful. And so I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that here in the park.
Have you had any really noteworthy sightings lately?
It's been good. The bison rut is kind of in full swing. And so we have these carcasses popping up in the landscape, and it's some of my favorite interactions to observe are wolf bear interactions. And so it's been pretty good over the last few weeks.
I've seen you post a lot of those videos. Like, just explain for those who haven't seen them. And if you're not following Taylor, by the way, on Instagram, please follow her because her videos are tremendous. What are some of the dynamics that, if you can go into some detail, that you typically see with the bison rut? Obviously, these bison are, dying because of the rut. And now these interactions that happen, not just with bears and wolves, but all the animals in the ecosystem that come to this carcass and interact in ways that maybe people wouldn't think would happen.
I think they're so fun to observe because every single carcass and every interaction is different. And so it really kind of depends on the personality of the wolves or of the individual bears they're interacting with. I've seen huge male grizzly bears, 400 or 500 pounds, literally lay on top of a carcass for hours and days. And the wolves just can't get into it. But I've also seen, 5 or 6 adult wolves escort these young subadult grizzly bears away by nipping their butts. It's fun to watch the mother grizzly bears with their cubs trying to figure out how they can fit in on these carcasses. And so I think that's just so fun to observe because all of them are so different and the interactions are so unique. So it really varies. It's super fun to be able to observe these interactions in the wild between these apex predators.
It's very cool. I mean, I can't really say anything other than that because it's just, like you said, it's like watching a soap opera on a daily basis. And, between you, I saw Jeremy post a couple things. He's typically on the down low on his social media, but he's had a couple of videos lately that have been pretty awesome.
He's trying to get better. I'm proud.
I know. Everybody has to learn. We have to grow and evolve as we get a little bit older in our practices, right?
Of course.
The one thing I want to touch on real fast too that you guys were talking about, I feel like maybe a few months ago more so than now, was the Shrimp Lake Pack. And I know they spend a lot of their time outside of the park. You guys were really talking about their stories and talking about this pack for a good amount of time. Just give people a slight bit of insight about maybe how that pack formed or what's sort of their territory in relation to the other packs, Junks and Buttes and things that people might know about more so than maybe the Shrimp Lake Pack.
Sure. The Shrimps, they're my favorite pack. They are a relatively new pack in the park. And I think so many people are becoming so in love with them because, one, our sharing of them on social media, it makes people excited to see this pack. And 2, a lot of people followed 1228, their dominant female. So she was born to the Junction Butte pack in 2019. And she split off a couple years later and she found a mate, black male. Typically, we have a general idea of where all of our wolves come from in the park, but this is a random black male she found. We had no idea where he came from. And so it was really exciting to kind of see their story unfold. They produced puppies that first year they were together, but then unfortunately, her mate was shot in the hunt outside of the park. And so when something like that happens, especially to such a small pack, they usually dissolve and they just don't do well. But then a couple months later, by some miracle, she found another random male, a gray male this time. We didn't know where he came from. And again, they produced puppies. And so it's just been so fun to kind of watch their story unfold. And they typically kind of reside in the northeastern portion of the park. So they kind of are right on the edge of Junction Butte territory. They occupy a little bit of that Lamar Valley area, all the way over into Soda Butte, Round Prairies, where they spend a majority of their time. But yeah, they do flirt with the park boundary, as do a lot of our packs. But it was really exciting for us this past winter. We only had one working collar in that pack, 1228's collar. And last fall it failed. And so we had no way to keep track of the pack anymore, which is really disheartening, especially when we're so eager to see them and see how they do. But by some miracle, this past February, we were able to put radio collars in the pack. We got the dominant male. He became 1488. And we also got her daughter, the only black wolf in the pack, and she became 1487. And so it's been fun to keep track of them. And, we haven't seen any pups from them this year. And I actually haven't seen them for a really long time. I think my last sighting of them was July 19th. But, they're doing well as far as we know. And I hope to see them in the coming months.
And how big is that pack now? I remember they were relatively small when they were first.
Yeah. So if they're all together still, there should be about seven of them. So 7 adults. So they're doing fairly well. I think that they're a little bit intimidated by the Junction Butte pack. Fortunately, because 1228 is from that pack, the likelihood that there would be super negative interactions isn't super high. but there could be. She's been gone for a while now, so if they ran into each other, there definitely could be some fatalities. And so I think that's just what keeps them more towards the northeastern portion of the park.
And so do we know? So do you know or have any sense if 1228 is actually deceased, or you guys haven't seen her for a while, so you don't know her whereabouts?
We just don't know. We haven't seen them for a while. The radio collars are working from the other two, so we wouldn't think otherwise. But if you just don't get eyes on them, you really have no idea. There could only be two. It's just really impossible to say. So we'll wait. Usually this is pretty typical for us to not get sightings on them in the summer months. It's usually in the winter where we're getting some pretty good views, and so we'll just be hopeful that we do get eyes on them and can get a good count. And yeah, we'll see. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, and we'll definitely keep everybody, in the loop. I mean, I share your videos all the time on the podcast channel, so it's just, I have no doubt that if there's a Shrimp Lake sighting, that we'll post it again.
Of course.
You brought up something really interesting in the emails we were emailing back and forth to get this podcast on the books, and you were talking about this bioacoustics program that seems to be new. Can you just go into what this program actually is so people understand kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so over the last year, it's been over a year now, we started a new bioacoustics program. We kind of refer to it as the Crywolf Project. And we're working with Dr. Jeff Reed. He's based out of Emigrant, Paradise Valley area. And we're trying to use these devices. They're called ARUs, which stands for Autonomous Recording Unit. And they cost about $1,200, and they can record vocalizations for about 34 days, up to 6 kilometers. And so we're putting these devices all across the northern range of Yellowstone and a little bit of the interior. And we're trying to record wolf vocalizations. And then we're also using artificial intelligence to see if there's a way to recognize individual wolves based on howling patterns or howling signatures, right? Can we identify packs via patterns or signatures? Are there different functions for different types of wolf howls or chorus howls? One thing that we're really focusing on is, can we count the number of wolves based on howling alone, right? That would be game changing if we could get the abundance of wolves based on howling, right? Especially for counting wolves like in the state, right? And so what better place to kind of test these theories and use this new recording method than Yellowstone, where we know pack compositions, we know the specific number of wolves in every pack. So this is something that's really, really exciting, and we're really working on. I don't know if you guys can throw in some vocalizations if I send them to you, just to give an idea so people can have an idea of what it sounds like, because it's really, really cool work, and it's groundbreaking and cutting edge. And so it's really exciting to kind of be on the forefront of that, and getting to start this. We have been really following the Rescue Creek Pack and the Junction Butte Pack. Obviously, because we have a relatively good idea of where they're going to den every year, we can get in there and put those devices in there before the wolves even get there and have them start recording at a specific date that we set up. And so, we're getting these first sounds when the puppies emerge from the den for the first time, right? And we're getting these vocalizations back and forth. And then we're getting a ton of other different vocalizations from different species as well, right? We're getting vocalizations from bears, and hundreds and hundreds of birds, and can we use these vocalizations from these different species to detect rare species, right? Wolverines or lynx or whatever it is. And so right now, Jeff, he's throwing these vocalizations into this AI model to try and pick out all of these pieces and figure all of these different things, but he's also manually sifting through all of these. So, hundreds of hours of his time. And so it's just really cool to be a part of that. And I think one of the things that we're most excited about is, can we use these vocalizations to help minimize livestock depredations outside of the park, right? So if you think about it, if you have a pack of 20 and they're howling and there's a pack of 10 nearby, the pack of 10 is going to run out of there, right? Because there's a bigger pack. So if you have wolves, a pack of 5 wolves that are eating cattle in an area, could you play a playback of a pack of 15 in the area, and could that remove them from that, right? And so there's all of these different things and these different questions we're trying to ask, and it could be some really cool stuff that we figure out.
Imagine if that's all that
that would be great.
That would
be yeah,
what
would be a really great non-lethal.
Yeah, and wolves are smart, right? Wolves are smart. Obviously, that's not going to be something that is effective over and over and over, but it can be a tool, a non-lethal tool that they throw into the mix, so just a lot of exciting things we're kind of dabbling in right now, which is exciting.
So what's kind of the barrier to you guys implementing that or trying that?
We're still we're really at the beginning stages of it still. So We're still really collecting all of these vocalizations to create the model, make sure the AI model is effective, right? I think right now it's at about 80%, which is good, but we want it to be better, right? So we're still really testing all of this. All of this is new. But then, I guess the next step is working with someone who's willing to try and implement something like that,
right?
I don't know. We're still at the beginning stages, but it's really, it's fun to be a part of this right now.
It would be good because it would be, again, just have another tool in the toolbox. Because it seems a lot of the coexistence strategies or the non-lethal measures that people are using seem to be working less and less. I guess when you talk about flagery, when you talk about some of the, it seems as though people are gearing more towards livestock guardian dogs as really a more permanent and good solution. Those and range riders seem to be the most workable and successful programs, but this would obviously in a way be a game changer because you could actually play a rival pack or just a pack that's in the area or any wolf for that matter. And that could really deter other packs, especially if they're new to the area.
Totally.
And if you're really looking to get that away, that would be fantastic.
I always love to shout praises to the Tom Minor Basin Association. Malou Anderson, Hillary Anderson, they really are working super hard to coexist with predators and implement these non-lethal methods and share their success stories. And so I always do recommend for anyone who's curious about, how these non-lethals work, what are some of the things that are being implemented, to check out their website and the work that they're doing, because it's really remarkable stuff.
Is there any newer measures that they're implementing that maybe people don't know about? Obviously, flagery, squawk boxes, fox lights, things like that. Is there anything new that you've heard of that they've come up with, or kind of the same old?
Yeah, I was just up there a couple months listening to some of the stuff they're doing, and it sounds like they're implementing some of the same things that people have been doing for years, but they're doing them in different methods, right? And so I think that's really important. They talk about, they do shift where their cattle graze every day. They're shifting over and over, so the predators aren't getting used to where they're at. And she talks about them playing, Coldplay on a boombox super loud in the middle of the night, just to change it up a little bit, scare some things away. Syncing their cattle baby births with elk calf, right? So the predators aren't going after their calves, they're going to go after the elk calf because that's what they want to naturally eat. And so it's just really interesting to kind of hear the things that they're doing. They're still using range riders, which is really important, but I do think something that's important and worth mentioning is it's expensive and it's hard to coexist with predators. But it's possible. And I think people just need to have to want to make the change. And that's kind of where we're seeing the pushback and the struggles. People don't want to make the change, right? It's hard, it's frustrating. And so I think, we just need a little bit more acceptance for that going forward.
When you think about this bioacoustics program as it goes forward, because you are picking up all these sounds, and obviously you'll get elk calls and bison if they make noise, or any other ungulate that's on the landscape. I wonder if it would be possible to put those things in different sections of, say, where cattle graze. Not that you want to attract wolves, like some way that you could point it I guess, out towards the
Sure.
forest or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's something that they would be thinking of as well, once you guys obviously sift through it.
I mean, I think so many things can be done with this new bioacoustic stuff. Really, really important. You know, I think kind of all the possibilities are endless right now.
And in terms of, I know you said hours, and I don't know if there's a finite, time, but when you are actually able to pluck out specific wolf howls and things of that sort, what is that going to do for you guys on the research end? Like, obviously, I would imagine you'll catalog it, categorize it, and this is going to be used for what? I guess is the question. So when you have all this cataloged, it's female from Junction Butte, no collar. What's the end goal for all of this bioacoustic stuff, along with coexistence and non-lethal helps?
Sure. I think, depending on who you are kind of right now in the project, everyone kind of has their own idea of where this can go. I think right now, the biggest thing we're trying to do, kind of our main focus, is abundance of wolves. Because a lot of people have their own opinions, and I'll be honest, I don't know enough to make any comment about it, but the IPOM, right? The way that the states count the number of wolves. And so a lot of people disagree with that. And so if we can use these bioacoustics to have a more accurate way to count wolves, I think that's kind of our goal right now, is abundance. That's really what we're aiming for. As for everything else, it's been unique in that, like Jeff, he can recognize specific wolves based on the hertz that their frequency is. He can recognize 907, our oldest wolf in the park, because she's a super deep, low howl. And so that's really interesting, and I don't think we've really asked any specific questions right away. But I think just being able to, pick out who is starting a chorus howl in the pack, right? Is it the dominant leader? Is it the puppies? Is it whoever? And I think just those types of questions are super interesting for us right now. So still at the beginning, I think, a little bit here.
And you are using it for other species, or like this type of audio research? Yeah.
Yep. And we're starting to get cougar vocalizations, caterwauls, and other cool things, which is really fun.
Wow.
So we're getting all of these things that's just been fun to pick through and sort through. And so I'm excited to kind of see, as the technology advances, where can we go? How can this be implemented around the world? I just had a woman here from Tanzania. She was part of the Conservation Nation Fellowship Exchange. And she does human wildlife conflict in Tarangire National Park. And the thing she was most fascinated about here in Yellowstone is our use of bioacoustics, because in Africa, they're losing livestock every single day due to predators. And for them to, kind of decipher as to which predator is killing their livestock, they're boots on the ground looking for, the faintest hint of a print, in some loose dirt. And so if they could put up a bioacoustic device and hear the predators that are in the general area, right, that's just game changing for them. It can help give them an idea, like, okay, hey, there's a leopard, within 2 kilometers of here. Let's really double down on, protection of livestock tonight, or whatever it is. And so I think that's super fun to kind of be able to share those insights with people around the world as well.
Yeah. I mean, what does the technology look like? Can you just describe the technology? It's just a generic microphone, or?
Yeah, so we are using something through Wildlife Acoustics. It's called a song meter, and it's just a little box about the size of your hand. And it has these 2 puffy mics on the side, and the box opens up, and you put 6 batteries on the inside along with a memory card. And then the batteries are typically lasting, for about 34 days. We do have a new solar powered contraption as well that can last up to a year. The only reason we're going to have to change it is because we have to change the memory cards. But the part that's difficult with the solar powered one is, we're in Yellowstone, we're in the public eye. It is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bulkier. We don't want this to be an eyesore. So we have to put it in places where it's just not visible from the public, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But yeah, it's really, it's really just a simple piece of technology that is, kind of changing the game for a lot of things.
And so when you get the memory cards back, is that where you're running it through the AI, or Jeff is running it through the AI program to siphon out all the different waveforms and where they all land on the spectrum, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Very cool.
Man,
So it's been fun. I
wild
can
stuff.
share with you guys. We just put a ARU out at a carcass that had 9 grizzly bears on it, 10 wolves. And we got some really, really cool vocalizations of the bears fighting and the wolves fighting, so I can share that with you guys because it's pretty amazing stuff that we're being able to capture, from 6 kilometers. It's a really far distance that we can pick up these vocalizations.
Yeah, that's wild. That's so cool. Yeah. Any of that stuff you want to send along, we'll happily share with everybody. That's fantastic. But definitely keep us up to date about where this technology goes. Obviously, I mean, anything in its early stages is always, you're going to have issues and stuff, but this sounds fantastic for you guys. The other the second thing I know we wanted to get into also that you mentioned in the email is, and I think I'm fairly certain that the first time we spoke with Jeremy, he was talking about habituation and all the issues that he was dealing with.
Yep.
And this was years ago, and I'm sure none of this ever ends. But when with you guys specifically in Yellowstone, with the amount of people traffic, car traffic that goes through there, obviously there's always the habituation problems or the issues that come up about wolves getting too used to people and that transferring over to when they leave the park and so on and so forth. So have those concerns changed or been elevated? Have they decreased a little bit? What are the major concerns that you all have as wildlife techs and stewards of the park that you're seeing with wolves specifically that's been happening over the course of, I guess, the last couple of years?
Yeah, this is funny. This is a big full circle moment because the very first podcast I did with you guys while I was guiding was on habituation, and 2.5, almost 3 years later, we're still kind of figuring that out. Obviously wolves in Yellowstone, they're predisposed to becoming accustomed to humans on the landscape, right? We have 5 million visitors coming through the park. They're having these interactions with wolves. We have a huge piece of pavement that runs through a majority of our wolf pack's territories. We're bound to have some human wolf interactions, right? And so, a big part for us on the project is just to try to help these wolves maintain this natural, healthy fear. Obviously, if we were living in a place where wolf hunting wasn't an issue, we wouldn't care. It wouldn't be an issue if wolves were curious or interested in getting close to people. We've never had a wolf attack in the park. They're very, they're curious, but they're also very scared of us. They really don't want anything to do with us. But because we do have a hunting season on them, we want to make sure that these wolves are staying protected when they leave the park. We want them scared of us. We don't want them approaching us. And so we kind of work under this levels of hazing that we implement. And so we kind of have 3 different levels. We have a low level, mid level, and a high level form of hazing. Low level hazing includes things like honking your horn, yelling, clapping, just to kind of get the animal moving a little bit quicker. If they're hanging out in a developed area like a picnic area or housing unit, or just laying in the middle of the road, hanging around the road too comfortably. If the yelling, the clapping, the honking isn't working, and this is usually for our repeat offenders, we might, move up to that mid-level of hazing, which includes things like maybe a can of bear spray to the face if they're too close, or paintballs. So Jeremy and I specifically, we're the ones that are really working the road corridors, dealing with the public and the wolves. And so we carry paintball guns in our cars. If wolves are just a little bit too comfortable, we might hit them with a couple paintballs. Obviously, the goal is to actually make contact with them. The paintballs hurt. That's the point. If you can imagine being hit by a paintball, it's not pleasant, or taking a rubber band and snapping it on your skin. It's just uncomfortable. And so we want to do that to have that wolf associate this negative consequence with whatever behavior they're not doing. Obviously, that's easier said than done. We'd like to hit the wolves, but they're a lot faster than us. Usually we're flailing around when we're trying to hit them. So we don't often make contact, but the noise alone usually scares the wolves, into fleeing a lot faster. If that isn't working, we will then move to the higher level hazing. And that includes things like rubber bullets, firecracker shells, bean bags. This is done by law enforcement or bear management. You have to know how to shoot a shotgun. It needs to be done accurately. Not just anyone can do it. So this is something that we use as a safety measure. And this can actually wound the animal, and that's kind of the point. This is kind of our last ditch effort to try and change your behavior. And we've been really, really, really successful in changing the behavior of wolves through aversive conditioning and hazing. And I'm actually trying to put together something on this. I want to present on this in some of the coming conferences. But in the last 20 years, we have had over 211 wolf habituation events. 177 of those have had some type of hazing done to them. And something that I found is that over 65% of these wolves that tend to be habituated are less than 2 years old. So they're the youngsters, the teenagers, they're the ones that are, tending to be a little bit more curious. But 94% of all of the habituation events have occurred near the road corridors, right? As opposed to developed areas or interactions in the backcountry. And 98% of these wolves have belonged to packs with den sites less than 3 miles away from the road, right? And so when these packs are choosing to den near the road and close to the road corridors, these are the wolves that we're seeing having these not so positive interactions with people. Fortunately, we don't really have too many wolves that are habituated right now. We do have a couple that are tolerant, and we have been hazing them and trying our best. The Junction Butte pack, the Wapiti Lake pack, those tend to be our wolves that, the packs that have wolves that tend to be more habituated. They're our most visible packs in the park. There were some rumors this winter of wolves being fed in the interior, Wapiti wolves being fed in the interior. And it's really, really unfortunate because when those behaviors happen, they're really hard for us to reverse, right? And that's why we're seeing those wolves getting hit by cars or shot outside of the park. And so we're just trying to educate, prevent these human-wolf interactions from happening at close distances, and just really encouraging people to maintain that 100 yards distance or disturbance of the animal, right? So if you're a mile away and the wolves are bothered by you, you're too close, even if you are more than 100 yards away. And so Jeremy and I, more specifically out there just to encourage people to observe wolves through a distance, share our scopes, tell them why we want them to be fearful of us and how we're trying to help maintain that, and just provide education. Education's key, and I think we're being super successful with that.
When you're using bear, I've always been curious about bear spray, how long it impacts an individual. Do you ever observe wolves after a habituation event or hazing event where that you've used bear spray and just to see how long it sort of affects them?
Yeah, so usually what happens is if a wolf is bear sprayed, they just flee.
You'd never see them.
They flee.
Yeah, you don't see them.
Yeah, they're trying to get to water, right? Or they're rubbing their face in the ground, trying to get off the spray. But it's not usually, if that's the case, you're gonna leave the area pretty quick.
Yeah. Do you see any kickback from folks in the park who maybe are witness to these events and are going to hear this and say you're intentionally in some way harming the animal to course correct? What is the response that you guys usually do for that? Because I'm sure there are folks that are saying this is an extreme measure. Why would it go to this? And so what are the responses for that?
Yeah, it depends. A lot of people are super understanding. Some of them might be put off by it at first, but then, the goal is for us to then explain to them why we're doing this. And you get a lot of people who thank us. Thank you for protecting them. Thank you for wanting to keep them safe. They're really excited to learn about the work we're doing and how it is impactful, and how it works. But then you do get a lot of people who say, you just ruined my entire vacation. Right. I had this chance to get an up close sighting, up close photo or video of the wolf. You just ruined my trip, and you were as respectful and kind as possible. But at that point, I'm like, that's, I get it. But also this is why we're doing this. We're trying to keep this animal safe. And I'm going to be here, 2 weeks later, dealing with the consequence of this close interaction. And you might never see this animal again. Right. And so if I might ruin your vacation, but I'm going to ultimately keep this animal safe, then it is what it is. My job is to protect the resource. I want to protect the wolves. I care about the wolves. I don't necessarily care about the sightings. And so I'm going to be, consistent with the work that I'm doing.
Have you seen a lot of those interactions? And it seems as though there's less of those interactions with people who genuinely don't understand the guidelines of what needs to be happening in the park, not only for the safety of the humans as we've seen, if anybody doesn't follow Turns of Yellowstone on Instagram, it's a pretty good example of what happens there. But outside of wolves too, is there anything you guys try to do with individuals that get close to bears? Because Stephen and I both experienced this when we went to Yellowstone last time. I mean, there are people chasing bears for photos, for video, whatever it is. Are there protocols similar to what you guys do for wolves for bears? Is that out of your jurisdiction? How do those types of things get handled, if not by you or by someone else?
Yep, good question. Bear management also implements hazing for the bears. They typically just kind of go straight to like the rubber bullets, the firecracker shells, the bean bags. They need to be more aggressive for bears. Fortunately, the black bears are a lot more tolerant. So you do tend to see black bears close to the road foraging. They're a lot more comfortable with people. They're not as aggressive. The grizzly bears is when it gets scary, right? Because they can kill people. They're very aggressive, especially when we get those roadside bears, and we're at this point where it's easier to manage the wildlife than it is the humans. And so you do often see bear management, just going straight to hazing these bears that tend to be roadside, just to keep them fearful and get them back from the road. And that it's unfortunate that that's how it has to be, but we don't want to see these bears injure someone and then get punished for it, due to human, irresponsibility. So yeah, the hazing is implemented. Unfortunately, the saying a fed bear is a dead bear holds true. And so, over the years I've been here, we're hearing of people feeding bears bread or throwing a hot dog out of the window, and that's just super unfortunate. And I don't think people realize the impact that it has. The bears will be killed. We had a bear in Gardner that was actually euthanized this year by FWP because it kept getting into trash. It was getting these food rewards, and there's just no reversing that behavior. And when you do have these animals that are used to getting these human resources, they're going to kill someone, especially, for bears specifically. And so I just think, people need to be more educated. All of this information is given out the second you enter the park. Whether or not people read it, that's a whole nother story. And that's what we're dealing with, right? And I think that's another thing where social media comes into it. Wolves and bears, you're seeing these people get these portrait shots, these up close photos. And these people are using long lenses or they're using scopes. I really like to emphasize when I post, like, this was taken through a 95 millimeter Swarovski 2 miles away, because you do get these visitors who don't know any better, and they come in here trying to get these, close up grizzly bear shots with their iPhone. Right. And so it's just a lot of uneducated visitors coming in. They just don't know any better. And so, it's hard to fault them for it because they're excited. This might be the first bear or wolf they've ever seen. This gets people wanting to care about these animals. And so we want to share, but we need to be able to get this information out to, a lot of people, and just education, really, really important.
I've been seeing a lot of videos online just by happenstance of just folks letting their dogs off leash in the park as well. And that just seems wildly dangerous. I mean, social media obviously makes it look like something's happening just all the time, but man, those videos are really wild.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I see it. I see it multiple times a week. You could have the best behaved dog in the world, but if they see something they're not used to, they see an elk or they see a bison, they want to go after it. Your dog getting lost in the park, that's an absolute nightmare. And it's just, you need to keep your animals safe. You need to keep the wildlife safe. I don't advise it. I do bring my dogs in the park, but they're always tethered in the car. If they need out, put them on their leash. But no one has any business letting their pet, roam free in the park by any means.
Yeah, the park must just be constantly trying to come up with ways to mitigate this kind of thing. Or is it one of those deals where, we've tried what we can, so now it's just about cleaning up messes as they happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. There's a whole team of volunteers hired on specifically to help with bears. But because most of those people are volunteers, they can't actually cite anyone, right? And that's where the issue comes. Even with Jeremy and I, like, we can yell at people all we want, but we don't actually have any true authority, in the sense that we can't give someone a ticket. We can't punish them for their behavior. And so in law enforcement, they're dealing with other important issues, right? they can't be everywhere trying to yell at someone who's, walking out to the den site. And so often it is hard, for us to be able to get someone in trouble for that. Last winter, we did have our first case that was prosecuted, and we won for people walking out to the rendezvous site to mess with the wolves, and that was exciting. That was a victory, but it's very, very hard to actually, make a case and win it.
Right.
I wonder too, because you're across the multiple projects. The other one I always see too, outside of wolves and bears, is elk. And they are obviously in a lot more of the densely populated areas where we're talking about picnic tables where people sleep. I know in that first, I don't know what it's called. You go through that first section of the park and there's all
Mammoth Hot
yeah.
Springs.
So you're there and they're just casing the place. And so same question, I guess, is it the same type of habituation? Do you typically leave the elk alone? I know most people, it might be hard to believe. I feel like elk are slightly more dangerous. I know grizzly bears are a whole other level, but when you're talking about danger level, large ungulates like bison and elk obviously are dangerous. What are the ways that those types of situations are handled, if you have any information on that too?
Yeah. Elk are super aggressive, especially the ones right in town. One of the reasons that they're there is they're calving. They're giving birth to their babies there, right? And elk calves are hiders. So mom will hide the calf and then they'll go forage a couple 100 yards away. And so people won't know the baby's there. And then they get too close, and that's when the elk tend to be super aggressive. I have noticed, though, again, like I said, it's easier to manage wildlife than the people. Over the last few years, the rangers are actually taking horses and riding the elk out of town before most of the visitors come in. They push them down into the valleys so there aren't any negative interactions with people, because regardless of there being 100 signs up that say do not approach elk, we still have people approaching elk, trying to touch them. Last summer, I saw someone feeding an elk an apple. It's just they're very aggressive. They can kill you. One positive thing I will say, though, about the bison and the elk is that they don't tend to get habituated. They're they're comfortable with the people, but their behavior isn't going to change because the people are there, right? They're just grazing. They're just existing in their space. And so, fortunately, the bison's not punished if it gores someone for walking up to it, right? And so, I think that that's something that, is important, because these animals are just behaving naturally. And so when, you have someone who's trying to touch the bison, and the bison reacts negatively, they're not punished for it, which is great.
I'm sure you have far fewer sightings of cougars than wolves, but do you have any regular sightings of particular cougars in the park?
Sure. So we do collar a portion of our cats. I would say every winter I have at least 4 to 5 cat sightings. Nice. They're a lot easier to see in the winter, of course, because of the landscape, the snow. They really like to occupy that high rocky terrain that looks the exact same color as their coat. So they're very tough to find. Even though we have radio collars on them and there's a chance we know where they're at, we still can't find them. They're really, really tough to see.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a couple females that we see regularly, which is exciting. But they're tough. They're just not something we're going out every day to look for by any means.
I've heard people say many times, like, if there's a herd of elk around, there's a mountain lion around. Do they stay that close to an elk herd, like, religiously?
So, a majority of our cats, because they're occupying these high, rocky, mountainous terrain, they're typically killing like individuals. Right. It's not necessary. So there might be a bull elk walking through or an elk female walking through. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily hanging around herds. That being said, they are in an area where we do have big herds, and there are times where, we see one of our mountain lions has made a kill based on their GPS points, and it's in the middle of the flats, right? 30 yards off the road, and just no one sees them. No one will know it's there,
Insane.
which, it's wild. And so I think it's kind of spooky that saying, a mountain lion has seen you just aren't seeing it, which is kind of wild.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially hiking in the dark. If you had a night vision camera on me while I was hiking in the dark, you would think this guy is a nutcase. I'm just looking in every direction constantly.
Which is smart,
Yeah, I mean, it's what it is.
Yeah, no, it's
smart.
So
funny because we've it's funny at the sanctuary, we've caught a mountain lion, a resident mountain lion on our trail cams. And so we're talking, not even 100 feet from the wolves, and, just walking through, and we're always, again, in the daytime, you're like, all right, this thing's not going to come around when we're hiking. But yeah, to Steven's point, there are times where I'm hiking by myself with a wolf on leash, and we're going through, and I'm like, I know something's here, whether it's a mountain lion or a bobcat or whatever, because we do have a bobcat family. And so you're like, you just don't know. You're like, there's enough here to where something's around, but it's so cool. I mean, they're my favorite feline of all time. They're so awesome. Yeah. They're tremendous.
I think something that's cool and worth talking to Kira about, she can go more in depth on it if she'd like, but a lot of our wolves here in the park have toxoplasmosis.
Right.
The disease, if you hear that pregnant females shouldn't change cat litter boxes because these cats carry it. Well, our wolves get it from their overlap with mountain lions or cougars here, which is kind of cool. And so Kira helped put out a paper on that to talk about kind of the behavior and how it alters the behavior. And so that's really fascinating. I've been fortunate enough to see wolves interacting with mountain lions a couple times over the years. I saw the 8 Mile pack tree a mountain lion a couple winters ago, which is wild because, this big, ferocious feline runs up a tree like a house cat would, when a dog is nearby or whatever it is. And so it's been pretty cool to kind of watch the interactions between the two.
Man. You guys ever see stray dogs in Yellowstone?
No.
Really?
Never.
Nope. No. We've seen a couple of stray alpacas that have gotten loose, but no, never.
I kind of want a few alpacas, to be honest.
They're cool. Yeah, they're aggressive and cool. I've heard that llamas and alpacas are a good livestock protector. Yep, from big predators, just because they are so aggressive.
Wow.
Which is
I want a couple of those.
Yeah. We just got to federally fund everybody to get a couple alpacas, a couple of livestock guardian dogs and alpacas. It's like a package that comes, like a crate that drops. Like, here you go. Here's some here's some guardian stuff.
Yeah.
That's so wild. I want to go back real fast to the acoustics with the Cougars. Have you listened to any of have you picked up any cougar sounds yet? And like, what's that? What is like that hurts? What's the range as opposed to like a wolf howl, as opposed to like a cougar? Where does that land on the spectrum?
Really good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to send over a question and ask Jeff because he'll be able to tell. But I'll send you guys a caterwaul noise sound that you can play it so you can see what it sounds like, because it's quite spooky. It's not what I would have expected them to sound like.
Wow, that's wild. That's so cool.
So yeah, I can ask Jeff and
nice.
Let you guys know, but I'm not sure.
All right. No, that's just something I wonder about, like because I know it's like it seems like it's low and guttural, but it might be different. You never know, because it's a big house cat, because I have 2 house cats of my own, and I'm like, you were a mountain lion at some point, or you were about you were something larger than what you were at some point in time.
Sure.
We want to touch quickly too, Taylor, about Wolves Across Borders, because we were discussing this, and you have given me the bug now about trying to go to the Netherlands next year about this conference. So I was doing a little bit of digging, and it seems as though this will only be the second time that this conference has happened. And it looks, from what I was looking at, and obviously just please interject if I'm saying wrong, but it really looks as though this is multiple countries, multiple policymakers from across the world are coming together to share information, like you were saying, about habituation, about coexistence. And obviously wolves in Europe have really started to repopulate all across Europe and even parts into Asia. So there's a lot of different situations that they're dealing with that the United States and the American West doesn't have to deal with as much. So if you can go into Wolves Across Borders and what it actually means. I know it said like wolf ecology and coexistence measures, but is there anything deeper that people, if they're looking up this conference and maybe they want to take a jet and fly over the Netherlands, what are they kind of in store for? Or what's this really about?
Yeah, I only heard about it last year. My husband Jack, his advisor Joe Bump, went there, and he was like, "You guys got to get out here." Because yeah, I mean, there's just scientists from all over the globe kind of coming together and talking about different strategies of how to better coexist. What are some things that we're learning about populations and dynamics? And so I think something that I'm super excited for is to just, hear different perspectives on how coexistence is possible. What are things that they're doing that we're doing? Obviously wolves are behaving differently in different parts of the world. They're dealing with a lot of livestock depredation there, and they have a lot more success, it seems, with livestock guardian dogs. And they're doing all of these different things that I think we can kind of bounce ideas off of each other and learn from each other. I think I'm submitting to present on habituation, which I think I hope I get accepted because, we're one of the only places that actually implements hazing. And so it's not something that's done all over the world. A lot of other places, even in the US, Alaska, for example, they might just lethally remove their animal. You have an animal that's causing an issue, they're going to shoot it and kill it. We don't want to do that here. And so I think I would really love to share, the efficacy of the hazing methods and how, it helps us coexist and how these things can be implemented in other parts of the world to help change this. I've had people from Sweden and Switzerland reaching out about our hazing techniques and, how can this be effective? Can you give us suggestions and tips on how to make this work? And so I think that that's most exciting to be able to share that. I wish I had more information, on the conference itself, but I don't, other than what I've seen online. And it just talks, we want to discuss about the wolves and how polarizing and controversial they are. And so I'm excited about it. And I recommend anyone who's interested more in the conference to read online, because that's really all I know. I haven't really gotten, I'm excited to interact with some of the other biologists and people kind of involved with the work around the globe.
It seems like hazing would be a sort of generic go-to method when trying to manage predator conflict, or that it would be an obvious approach. Why do you think it's sort of been bypassed in those areas for so long?
In my personal opinion, I think it's just easier, right? Hazing is something that needs to be done during a teachable moment. You need to be able to catch them in the act of doing whatever they're doing to help reverse the behavior, right? It's not something that changes overnight. It needs to be done with constant repetition, right? We have the ability, because we're seeing our wolves every single day, to implement these hazing techniques. But I think it is something that's difficult, and it's just easier to remove the problem animal, right, than it is to kind of try and work with them and change the behavior. We don't want to do that, especially because a lot of their behavior is due to human negligence, right? And so we want to help fix this behavior that humans have caused, I think.
Do they have a similar amount of wildlife professionals in the Netherlands? I mean, are there a similar amount of people on the ground?
Yep. But I think, it's a lot more difficult to see their study species. So we had a woman here, Cecilia Di Bernardi. She was doing work in Italy. She had studied and gotten her PhD under Luigi Boitani, world-renowned wolf biologist. So she was incredible. And she was doing winter study with us. And I remember seeing tears in her eyes the first time she saw wolves. She's been studying wolves for years, and she said she's seen wolves like 2 or 3 times ever in Europe, right? And so the way that they're collecting data and doing their research is so different. We're determining predation and kill rate and what are wolves successfully feeding on and how often and how can we detect that through visuals, right? Through GPS collar data, going to carcasses. A lot of her work is done through scat collection alone. Right. And so it's just so interesting to kind of see how research is being done in a variety of different areas, just because, we are so fortunate that the visibility is so high here.
That has to be something. Talk about that winter study too, real fast, because it looked like you had a bunch of people from different countries that were tagging along with you guys. Were there any other experiences that stuck out to you with folks that were here that were able to see these wolves on a fairly regular basis? It seems as though you guys, and I know maybe it does get old. I don't know. I don't think it would get old for me. I can only speak for myself, but to be able to see these animals or specific animals and to have these storylines going for years and months it has got to be such an amazing thing to see as an outsider, where you guys are taking these people along for the ride for 30 days or however long that winter study was.
Absolutely. Jeremy and I were talking because we happened to be on the same crew with Cecilia that winter, and we take Yellowstone for granted. We take the ability to see wolves for granted. We're so jaded, right? We're like, oh, another day we just saw 30 wolves walking across the landscape. Boring, right? And Cecilia's in tears, jumping up and down. She saw them kill a bison. This is something that she's never dreamed of experiencing. And so it really makes you, take it all in and just really appreciate what we're actually getting to see. I also had a crew member. He works on the Mexican Wolf Project in New Mexico. His name's Pito, and he got to be on my winter study as well. And he, also like eyes bulging out of his head. He couldn't believe we get to see our wolves every day. We saw them 28 out of 30 days, that study period. This is something he would never imagine. And so it's so exciting to get to see, I guess, the spark and the fascination kind of through other people's eyes, because you just forget how special these moments are. I had someone comment on my Instagram yesterday who said, why don't you get as excited to see wolves anymore? I think one of my captions said, like, very rarely do I get super excited, during these moments. And it's because I feel like I've seen it all, and so it really has to be a special pack or a special sighting for me to really, get my heart pumping, my adrenaline going. And I really just kind of need to dial it back. And when I'm complaining about my job, to just realize, this is what I do. I get to work in one of the most amazing places in the world and share this experience with others. And so it's super special. And I think I forget that sometimes.
It is true. Yellowstone kind of freaks me out, to be honest. Like, even if I'm just like, I've hiked in Montana a bunch of times, or Wyoming or Idaho or whatever. And even just really, within an hour of the park, I've hiked, and it's like a ghost town, like it normally is in the woods. Normally when you see an animal, you're like, holy shit, there's a freaking animal. You know what I mean? It's not like you don't just get on the trail and all of a sudden there's critters everywhere. It just doesn't Yellowstone, in some way, I'm like, is this real? Is this like a holographic event? Like, I just don't know what's happening. Why are there critters everywhere?
Yellowstone is a whole beast.
It really is.
Yeah, it's a whole different place. It is.
It's unbelievable that it exists.
It reminds me of that scene in Jurassic Park where like Grant and Ellie see the brachiosaur for the first time. Then she like turns his head and then he's like, welcome to Jurassic Park. And it's like, you see all of it's the same thing as Yellowstone. Because when we met you guys the first time, and we saw the wolf, like literally the scene at a Nat Geo that people would see. It's like the coyotes come across and the ravens fly, and then the wolves come down. I was like, that wasn't real. And then we have lunch and we come back out and we see them kill a bull elk. I was like, none of this is happening. Like, this can't be a real thing. Totally. But it's such a...
It has that fishbowl effect where you're just like, what is going on in this little place?
Yeah. A couple of days ago, I had some visitors for the first time here. They were from Massachusetts. And in my frame, I had a moose, bison, grizzly bear, wolves, sandhill cranes, and ravens. And I'm like, and they're like, ooh, this is awesome. And I couldn't even emphasize, like, I don't think you guys get how amazing this truly is. Nowhere else, in the lower 48 will you experience something like this, so it's special. Man. Yeah.
I would love to see a moose, I got to be honest. From distance, obviously. But that's wild to have a moose in there. Just you guys it really is what a blessing for you guys to be able to do this work and really to be able to share your experiences. Because that's the best part, is to see what you're able to see every week at minimum, multiple days a week, just to be able to share the information. And really, we can't thank you enough, Taylor, for just sharing all of this, the information, the knowledge that you have, because it really is vital for these people to understand. Anybody who's listening to our podcast and listening to you and seeing that Yellowstone is such a special place. These animals are special, and they're, everything needs to coexist in a way that's possible for us to have a place like Yellowstone. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's been so special. It's been so overwhelming this summer. It feels like we're busier than ever. We're giving hundreds and hundreds of talks. We're interacting with these young school groups, middle schoolers, inner city groups, from DC and Michigan. And all of these people are coming here, and these young kids are experiencing something that otherwise they never wouldn't, without these conservation groups and other things kind of encouraging them and funding their ways. And as overwhelmed and sometimes so frustrating, it's like, oh, I have to give another group tonight. I'm tired. I interacted with some kids from DC last week, and one of them, wrote me a note who said, "You are a dreamer. Like, you inspired me to chase your dreams." And I think that those types of interactions in those moments, like, it snaps you back into reality. Like, this is why I'm doing this. This is why our work is important. As frustrating and annoying as it is to sometimes, be educating day in and day out, this is so, so important, right? A kid who thought, he could never do this, he could never go to college, whatever it is, you're inspiring this next generation. And I think it's really important. And I think something that's been so powerful and overwhelming over the last few years, Jeremy and I were both people of color. And I know for me specifically growing up, I didn't see anyone who looked like me, in the conservation field. And so to be out there on the ground, seeing people recognize, these are two young biologists in the field doing this work, like, we can do this too. This is something that's obtainable. And I think that's just been super special.
It's so cool. You guys are awesome. You're the best. Taylor, I know I asked you this way back when, but I'll ask it again. When you hear the word wolf, what's the thing that comes to your mind?
Someone actually just asked me that the other day. And you think about it, and I get a variety of different words. I feel anger, right? There's so much anger and hatred with the word wolf, political, but then also on the complete opposite spectrum, like, it's hope, right? You're hopeful for a better future, for this change. I think I'm encouraged to, share wolves, share their importance and their benefit, how they benefit the ecosystem. And I think kind of the word right now that I, think of when I hear the word wolf is just change. I think we're seeing changes over the years. People are becoming more tolerant. They want to see wolves on the on the landscape. They're paying thousands of dollars to come here to see these wild animals. And so I'm very hopeful for the future.
I love it. Taylor Rabe, thank you again just for all of your stories, your laughter, your joy, just everything that you have. And like I said, your skill set is second to none. Thank you for doing what you do at Yellowstone and teaching and educating. You're the best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One last thing I want to say is, to anyone who's thinking of coming to Yellowstone, never hesitate to reach out. We love sharing wolves. We love sharing the work that we do. So I'm always happy to help you guys out, meet in the field, show you guys some wolves. So never hesitate to reach out.
Take her up on that, everyone. Follow her on Instagram. She's great. Hang tight while we sign off, Taylor. How's to you all out there, and we'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.